When Classic Plus finally happens, it's going to contain new content. That's the whole idea of the Plus version of it. It should be vanilla that continues on the story that we know and adds to the world in meaningful ways. And there are plenty of additions that we're all expecting, such as new zones, new dungeons, new raids, new PvP events, all that kind of good stuff. But beyond that, there are certain things that don't come up around this conversation so often. There are a lot of half-finished systems, dead zones, and mechanics that never really got a proper look in vanilla, because back then the developers were very much just doing stuff which they felt was cool. And they got it right a lot of the time. But over the years I feel as though there's one or two things which could be better, or could be built on a bit more than they are in our current vanilla. I want to go over a few changes which I think could be interesting in a vanilla setting, which are a bit less obvious than just the usual you hear about of new raid or zone. So for me, these are some of the less obvious changes which vanilla could potentially benefit from. Before we go on, a quick word from today's sponsor, and stick around because there are a bunch of legendary champions up for grabs and tons more rewards. Right now they've just kicked off a global event called Web of Corruption. Claim the brand new legendary champion Vallaryn the Equalizer for free by logging in for 7 days during the Vallaryn chase between July 2nd to August 18th. Just make sure you start the event by July 31st, and then keep logging in for 7 days to earn extra gear and upgrades for Vallaryn. Vallaryn's a proper double threat, dishing out massive AoE damage that ignores defenses, while stacking weaken and leech debuffs to keep your team sustained through the toughest fights. There's also a limited time dungeon featuring Raya the Mourned if you want extra gear to push further. The game I'm talking about is of course Raid Shadow Legends, and for me it has so many factions to build around. There's always a new team comp worth putting together and experimenting with, just to see how overpowered of a setup you can put together, and right now is a great time to get started. You can click the link in the description or scan the QR code for exclusive rewards. You can also pick one free legendary using a code: GETALICE for Alice the Wanderer, PHEMO for Femo the Shepero, SUPERVICTORY for Pelops the Victor, or RAF for Grand Oak Padraig. On top of that, log in for 7 days during the Vallaryn chase before July 31st to add her to your roster too. My link also unlocks Narma the Returned instantly, plus the epic Uugo at level 10. That's 3 free legendaries and an epic just for getting started, so make the most of it while you can. As always, many thanks to Raid for supporting the channel. Let's get on back to WoW. So we'll start off with something that almost every druid, paladin and shaman has felt at some point in time, and that's having an item slot which does practically nothing until you're at endgame. And that's the relic slot, the one that holds your idols, librams and totems. They weren't even added into the game until patch 1.10, you know. That's right towards the end of vanilla. Before that, these classes just had, well, nothing there. Eventually you get to that one quest in Eastern Plaguelands and put Egan's blaster in there and then never use it, but it wasn't till much later on when you started doing dungeons or raids where you actually got an item here. I mean, sure, in vanilla you have to level up a bit before you earn certain items such as your helm, some bits of jewelry or your shoulders, but waiting until literally endgame before you get anything just feels a bit odd, to be honest. Classic Plus has a pretty easy fix here: just put more relics in the game at an earlier level. I'm sure people playing these 3 classes would appreciate it. Here's something that goes a bit beyond the relic idea as well, because for shamans they physically hold their totems in their bag. You know the deal, you go and do the quest, you get your totem, you have it in the bag, and then you actually need that totem in your bag to be able to use totems of the corresponding type. But what if more was done with it than just this? See, for example, priests in vanilla have their own race-specific spells, and that can very much impact which race you pick as a priest. If you like PvP, you might pick Troll for Shadow Guard or Undead for Devouring Plague, whereas on the Alliance side, Dwarves have Fear Ward, which is widely seen as the strongest priest racial in the game. These kind of decisions you have to make between the different factions and races is something I do like a lot about vanilla. So what if between Orc, Troll and Tauren, their totems were each a little bit different? Not necessarily just visually either, but they had different effects to them. And then instead of them just being totems that sit in your bag, you can actually equip the totems into your relic slot and then gain certain bonuses. So if you equipped a fire totem, it may give you some spell damage or improve your fire spells. If you equip the earth totem, perhaps it could help out a new shaman tanking identity. You could even have a mini talent tree within the totem, though that's probably going a bit too far. But basically what I'm getting at is with this relic slot with shamans specifically, you could just have them equip their actual totems instead of making different items. The next one is something that goes way back to the development of vanilla, and that is regarding hero classes. The idea was at a later level your character would begin specializing into something regarding a hero class. So for example, Night Elves could specialize into demon hunting, Dwarf Warriors Mountain King, Undead Death Knights, and so on. This idea never fully disappeared, and some abilities from hero classes were added during later expansions, or have been used for inspiration for certain expansion-specific updates. And for Classic Plus, there could be something here as well. I don't think Mountain King would necessarily need to be an entirely new hero class, but potentially classes could receive a 4th specialization at some point in time to expand on the already existing class fantasy. Obviously this would complicate class balance even more, despite it not being very good to begin with, to be honest, but I think it could be an interesting idea to bring back and be rolled out slowly over time. The next one I have is much less impactful than the few I've gone over so far, but it would help build out the world a bit more. Every Alliance player who's gone deep into Winterspring knows exactly what the Winter Saber Trainer grind feels like. You have Riven Frostwind sitting atop Frost Saber Rock, handing out 3 repeatable quests which you just have to do again and again until you hit Exalted, at which point you can buy your brand new mount. It is quite prestigious to have done this because you have to do this quest some 500 or so times in a row if I remember right, and it's not a particularly enjoyable grind, but then again it's not supposed to be, it's supposed to be special. People are meant to recognize that you've achieved something here. Despite that, the reputation rewards from each quest could probably be a little bit better than they are, because everyone only ever spams the Winterfall Village quest because it's just so much faster. The one collecting the provisions has a really bad drop rate, and the 3rd quest sends you all the way to the south to kill a bunch of giants, which just takes way too long on travel time. I think with this quest, potentially a bit of an update to reputation earned could be in order, so they're a little bit closer to one another. And on the Horde side, you may know that in Ungoro Crater, there is an NPC for the Rabasaur trainers who was due to get a similar questline to the Winter Spring Frost Sabers in vanilla, but Blizzard just never got around to doing it. They wouldn't end up doing it until Wrath of the Lich King. The NPC is Morvek and he's down near the southeast. You'll have definitely ran past him and thought, what is this guy doing here? Because, well, he doesn't do anything in vanilla. I think overall here Blizzard have a chance to look at the amount of reputation gained from Winter Spring Frost Sabers and implement the Rabasaur trainers too, so that Horde players have something to chase after as well. Okay, so the next one will probably be the most controversial thing I'll go over here, but I'm just going to put the idea out there and see what people think about it. So if you played a caster in Classic, you know the feeling of trying to get a spell off whilst multiple enemies are chipping away at you. Every damaging hit you suffer will push your spell cast back just a little bit. So especially if you're getting hit by something like a Night Saber or a Rogue or anything that hits you really quickly, you're going to have difficulty completing that spell cast. And thematically, it makes sense. If you're trying to concentrate to complete a spellcast, it only makes sense that if somebody was punching you in the kidneys every half a second, you probably get, a bit distracted by that. However, I think in vanilla, Blizzard kind of overestimated how powerful casters were going to be. For example, when the game first came out, there wasn't spell damage. You just stacked intellect and had to rely on that to deal damage. Now, there already are a number of ways to counteract spell pushback, such as talents that reduce the chance for you to be pushed back, but that's still quite RNG heavy. And it's a similar system in TBC, and Blizzard wouldn't end up changing things until Wrath. What they did in Wrath at the start of the expansion was made it so that only the first 2 hits during a cast added extra time at half a second each. So the maximum amount of spell pushback you could suffer would be 1 second. Also, the talents that reduce the chance for your spell to be pushed back now reduce the amount of spell pushback you suffered instead. It's a pretty small tweak on paper, but it makes a massive difference to how smooth playing casters feels. Now, this probably would be too good in some areas in PvP to be fair, but it would make playing casters across the board a bit more predictable and in some cases a little bit more fair. Off the back of that is one which I think will be quite a bit more popular, because this has been a sore spot since 2019 Classic. The default nameplate range in Classic is so short that if you're playing something that shoots over 30 yards, you can't even see what you're attacking really. And honestly, it's just been scuffed forever. I genuinely can't believe it's still like this to this day. Back when Classic came out in 2019, people found macros that worked from the retail version of the game, which allowed you to extend the view distance where you could see nameplates from to above 40 yards. And then Blizzard came around and said, hey, we don't want you doing that, we're going to break those macros, enjoy your 20-yard range again. Of course, Blizzard have fixed this in later versions of the game, and they have actually said why they're keeping things like this in vanilla before, specifically for interactions such as caves where you wouldn't be able to see enemy nameplates ordinarily, but if they extended them, then than you would. That being said, the time for us to see nameplates from more than 40 yards away has been a long time coming, and I'm very much hoping they reconsider it again for Classic Plus. One of my favourite effects to see out in the open world are the weather effects. You got rain, snow, sandstorms, and so on, and these were added into WoW Vanilla in patch 1.10 back in the day. Beyond that, in future expansions, Blizzard have tied certain events to weather happening out in the world, such as there being pet battles that spawn during sandstorms in Silithus, or when it's raining you'll get monkeys spawning on Jaguaro Island in STV. But what I'd like to see is just more weather, please. It's really cool when it happens out in the world. It makes it feel like a much more living, breathing world, and I'm not sure what extent they could have seasonal weather because it may not make sense across the world, but whatever the case that might be in real life, there'll still be seasons that make sense in Azeroth, wherever you may be located. They really don't need to reinvent what weather's doing, they just need to add more of it in. But yeah, that's it with weather, would just love to see more of it. Next I want to talk about weapon skill. It's one of those systems that made sense as a design choice in 2004, and it's aged into something that, well, does anyone really enjoy this? I mean the leveling portion of weapon skill, not at endgame when you're beyond weapon skill and it's affecting your hit chance and so on. I mean, when you think about it, what are the weapon skill trainers actually doing when they teach you how to use a weapon? Imagine you got a piano tutor, you're there, you sit in front of the piano, you hit the keys a few times and they say, well, that's how you play a piano, go figure out the rest for yourself. That's basically what the weapon skill trainers do. And then when you're leveling weapon skill, it just takes hours and hours to finish off those last few points. And the last few points really are impactful. On top of that, the meta way to go and train weapon skill is to go and find NPCs in the world who are effectively immune to damage, and then just beat on them endlessly whilst not paying attention. The system is just bad, like straight up. I don't think they can remove weapon skill because, again, at endgame it is incredibly impactful for dealing damage. However, could it just be not so terrible to level up potentially? A random feature I'd love to see built on in Classic Plus would be inside of Blackrock Depths. You'll have seen the Dark Iron Highway. After you go inside BRD, you go through the locked door, and it's just beyond that. It's the place with Baelgar, and then a ton of dwarf patrols. Back in the day, at one point in time, a lot of people speculated what is behind those giant doors, and it's a real mystery which I absolutely think Blizzard have the opportunity to expand upon. Maybe it could lead into a larger foundry type area for the Dark Iron, or perhaps some chaotic elemental place they've had to seal off to keep even themselves safe. Either way, this is one place in the world which I would love to see expanded on. The final thing I want to talk about is one of the most well-received features from Legion Class Order Halls, a dedicated headquarter for every class, stocked with lore characters, class-specific storylines, and a real sense of identity for what you are playing. Now, of course, during Legion, every class got their own specific order hall. However, if you think to vanilla, then you'll realize that actually there are a few classes that already have an order hall. Druids have Moonglade, Rogues have Ravenholt, Warriors have Frey Island, kind of. I mean, it's not much to go of, but it's something. The most polished of these by far is Moonglade, and it's already built into the world. But I do wonder if other classes could find a place to effectively have some form of order hall or meeting point for people who play the same class. I think there would be a bit of a concern that it would split people up and they'd just spend time in their order hall instead of in capital cities. But for Moonglade, for example, you mainly go there for the class quests or the convenience of the teleport. Outside of that, it's not really a useful place to be whatsoever. It's a similar story with Ravenholt and Rogues. I think it's just nice to have a place where you can go and feel as though you really are playing your class, and that it doesn't have to turn into a one-stop shop for everything with an auction house, mailboxes, and all that stuff. So maybe Class Order Halls Light are something that could be expanded upon in vanilla too. And that's it, 10 smaller pieces of the game which I think could use a looking at in Classic Plus. So let me know which ones you agree with and that you'd like to see, and which ones you reckon would be going a bit too far in the comments down below. Thanks again to Raid for sponsoring. To get those 3 free legendaries and an epic, all you have to do is check the link below or scan my QR code. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening in, and I'll see you all in the next one very soon.